Now that Imperial Special Forces squad, that's a load of but did you ever stop to think that this new special operations thing might just be ShatterPoint? Now, the Star Wars miniatures gaming community has been focused on ShatterPoint for obvious reasons. It's coming out, I think, sometime this summer, and it's a totally brand new Star Wars miniatures game by Atomic Mass Games. However, kind of unexpectedly, we got something else from them in the form of this thing called Star Wars Legion Special Operations Beta. Now, it is, quote, a beta rule set, and AMG is taking feedback on it, but what this game is supposed to be is sort of like a Warband scale version of Star Wars Legion, but it does have a few changes we'll talk about here in just a moment. I finally got around to playing it this past weekend, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about my ideas, and also more importantly, some people have thought that maybe this game here is ShatterPoint, and I'll talk on that point a little bit later as well. Now, being a Warband game, you've got kind of 7 to 8 miniatures in your list. And unlike Star Wars Legion, they don't operate as a single squad per se. They're all independent models doing their own thing. However, this game is about 90% Legion. You have your order cards, you issue orders out, you draw tokens from the order bag. You even got wording such as unit leaders when it comes to mission objectives, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense when every guy running around is their own unit leader. But whatever, they're just using the same kind of language from the main game. And there is one wonderful, at least one wonderful AMG editing fail that we've kind of come to know with the last Star Wars Legion rule set. That shows up in the Imperial Special Forces list. But whatever, those things happen. It's kind of embarrassing and it's frustrating. I know how that can feel. One other interesting note, though, when it comes to talking about the individual stats for these soldiers, is even though they're an individual soldier, they're kind of like a squad. They have relatively similar firepower as to squads in Star Wars Legion, and they also kind of have like 6 life, which is kind of like the health that a Star Wars Legion squad would have. So you're sort of playing with full-size squads, but they're just individual soldiers. However, let's talk a little bit now about the important changes that Special Operations has over Standard Legion. I'm counting about 4 major changes to the game when compared to Star Wars Legion normally. The first thing is that the standard range measurement system with that fancy custom ruler that Star Wars Legion uses is gone. Instead, you're using normal measuring tapes. And this allows a little bit more flexibility in the range, but I don't know how much this really matters, to be honest with you, but it's something different. I know when I was playing with my commando squad for the Rebels, compared to the Imperial Force on the other side, my weapons tended to have just slightly longer ranges, about 2 inches longer, but did it matter? No, not really in the game we were playing. Next up, we have loadout cards. One thing that is missing from the beta of the Special Operations is actually force construction. You have to choose an existing force from the given ones they have there. They have 2 for each of the 4 factions. And also what's missing then is there's no unit upgrade cards like you have in Legion, where you can kind of do a little bit of customization to your army as on a per unit basis. So instead, you have these things called loadout cards, where you can select one of 2 sets for each army list, and they kind of fulfill that role of unit upgrade cards. They give you some options to add a little bit of flexibility to your units, and they give them new special abilities, maybe even change the unit being deployed, things like that. Now, the most interesting changes come in the form of cover and suppression. Cover is different in Special Operations because you're no longer canceling an automatic number of hits depending on what type of cover you're in. Instead, on the defense rolls, the surge symbols now come into play depending on whether you're in light cover or heavy cover. I don't know if I like this as much. This is a personal opinion thing. Just because it does change the math of, in particular, a lot of Rebel units, because now you no longer have surge to defense. Instead, if you want to take advantage of those surges, you got to be in cover, which may not always be the best thing given the types of missions we were playing. So it's like, well, a lot of the Rebel units now have like half the survivability, which then, of course, that's just a matter of adjusting points values and blah, blah, blah to balance things out. But I kind of like the old system of cover a little bit better. When it comes to suppression in Star Wars Legion, I was never a big fan of it because I felt it was kind of irrelevant. Now, in the original main game where you lost one action, it was kind of annoying, but because of the fact the game was so lethal, by the time a unit often got to the situation where it lost an action, there was like 2 guys left in the squad, and that squad was not going to have a huge impact in the game anyway. As for the whole panicking aspect of things, that was almost completely irrelevant in nearly every game I played. I want to say I had maybe 1 squad panic or run off the board in the history of Star Wars Legion, and that was because you could almost always use your commander's courage value to keep yourself on the board, and therefore, like I said, it was almost completely irrelevant. So things definitely changed here in Special Operations, and it's different and it's kind of interesting, and I like it a little bit better than main Star Wars Legion, but in some ways, maybe I wouldn't mind seeing it even be a little bit more brutal. And I'll talk about that just in a moment. So what happens here in Special Operations is when a unit becomes suppressed, they just have reduced firepower. So, which is kind of a little bit different. And I think, though, why they probably didn't make it as more brutal as maybe I would like, because the fact in Special Operations, when you take wounds, you don't lose firepower because it's 1 soldier. Therefore, if you were to actually have a soldier get suppressed and they could lost an action, it actually matters a lot more in this game than it would, say, in main Star Wars Legion. But you know what? A game that handled suppression really well was Beyond the Gates of Antares, and it was brutal. Because the fact that suppression occurred much more often than actually killing soldiers, you would get situations where you would have a nearly full or full unit that's slightly suppressed, and what happens, they'd fail a courage check, and that unit would go down and you lose your action for the turn, and it really messed with your strategy, and it was awesome. So maybe I wouldn't mind seeing this be a little bit more brutal instead of being not super flavorful, but you know, it's a matter of what you would like. When it comes to panicking in Special Operations, it's definitely very different than Legion. How it works is when you get more suppression in your courage value, you're going to roll some dice and determine whether you take additional wounds. It is a little awkward for this type of mechanic to apply when you're talking about individual soldiers. We'll leave some of the offensive jokes out about that. But similar mechanics like this, where essentially when a squad panics and runs, or I guess when a squad panics, for lack of a better phrase, they suffer more casualties. You see similar things like this, say in Warhammer 40,000 or Age of Sigmar. Both of them have some sort of courage check mechanic. When you fail it, you're going to take additional wounds. I suppose the idea is when that happens, other soldiers aren't really dying, but they're just running away from battle, which, I mean, maybe that's a thing. Talk to someone who's actually been in combat. To me, it seems kind of a little weird where you just have like a squad of 5 guys chilling there and one of them runs away. I mean, maybe it happens. I don't know. But that's basically how ShatterPoint works. It kind of brings that aspect more in line with other tabletop miniatures games. Did I say ShatterPoint? Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself right there. Special Operations works like that to bring it more in line with other tabletop games. So let's ask the big question then, because I just dropped the name ShatterPoint. Is this rule set we see here simply a beta for ShatterPoint? So you know how the internet works. When you see a big question like this, the answer is almost always no, and I think that's the case here. Let me give you 4 points of evidence why I think Special Operations Beta is not actually ShatterPoint. First point of evidence, as I mentioned earlier, this game is basically 90% Legion. I don't think ShatterPoint would be that close to Legion, especially when I know AMG says it's not Marvel Crisis Protocol, but we definitely get those MCP vibes. So that's why I think we're playing here is indeed some sort of special version of Legion. Now, point number 2 is there's no heroes in Special Operations Beta. They're all individual normal soldiers. If you were to bring one of the A-team into this game, I imagine you're probably looking at somebody that's like 30 wounds and can run around the board, slash people up with their lightsaber really fast, and that's not balanced within the type of gameplay we're playing here. So whereas ShatterPoint probably tries to find a little bit better balance between heroes and normal soldiers, at least that's how it looks from the little bit of information we have about the game. Now number 3 comes in with the actual unit cards. The unit cards here are Special Operations. They're Star Wars Legion unit cards. There are a little bit of differences, different special rules, things like that, but at the end of the day, you could almost take these things and use them in a Star Wars Legion game if they had a few extra pieces of useful information. We have sort of seen one ShatterPoint unit card. Mostly that card was blurred out, but frankly it looks a lot more like an MCP unit card than anything we see in Star Wars Legion. And 4, a few days before I'm recording this, AMG dropped an article about the struggle tracker, which is a major aspect of ShatterPoint and how you score points, and also how the flow of the game is going to go from kind of sequence to sequence and what missions are going to be in play. Here with Special Operations, what we have is basically Star Wars Legion. These scenarios you see here could probably be pretty easily ported over to Star Wars Legion without too much effort. In fact, the first mission I played here could actually work really well just as a Star Wars Legion scenario. And there isn't anything even in here that looks like this struggle tracker. So therefore, if I'm thinking this is not actually ShatterPoint, the question comes in then, what is this Special Operations Beta for? Now at this point, I've got 2 ideas as to what Special Operations Beta is, and I'm going into wild speculation territory because we have no evidence to actually figure out what AMG is actually thinking with this particular rule set. First is that this is actually a beta of 2nd edition Star Wars Legion. Once again, it's about 90% Legion with a few things changed to kind of modernize, quote, modernize things. It's sure, whatever. And also maybe mix things up a little bit and try to rebalance some aspects of the game. All things you would expect to see in a 2nd edition of the game. And therefore, by disguising it as Special Operations Beta, well, I think you're looking at a way of kind of hiding the fact that you're really playing 2nd edition Legion. The other theory is that what this is, it's actually going to be a new mini starter set. And that's probably why you're looking at fixed lists, because these fixed lists may be some sort of set of starter sets that they can choose from, or maybe there'll be individual squad boxes you can buy that serve as your own starter set into Special Operations, and then therefore also kind of work as a very low cost entry point potentially to get people in to the full Star Wars Legion game. Now Games Workshop does this with Warhammer 40,000, you have Kill Team, and then Age of Sigmar has Warcry, and other gaming companies, I know War Machines try to do this with some sort of little Storm Guard versus Pig Monster things. So it's a kind of a common tactic where you want to have a, quote, cheaper or lower entry point game that then feeds people in to a bigger, more expensive game. Now I don't know the details of the production pipeline for Star Wars Legion miniatures, but I would not be surprised if these lists are designed in such a way that they can be easily created as individual boxes without major changes to the miniature production pipeline, or maybe AMG has so many of certain types of units laying around that are just extra stock they can't sell, that they can then reorganize those into, you know, a box set like this they can pass off as a Special Operations starter set. And you know what? Maybe that Wookiee warrior with the bowcaster is actually Chewbacca. Just a thought. He's kind of an oddball sitting in there. To go back to my opening comment about the IFS squad, I'm going to be honest with you, my defense walls just kind of sucked that game. And the benefits that the Rebels Commandos have, they don't really apply when you're playing, hey diddle diddle, let's charge at the middle and capture some objectives. Because one, the bonuses they get for being in cover, they don't apply when you're charging up the middle. And the extra ranges, where they're like 2-inch longer ranges, also don't really apply when you're charging up the middle. However, that Scout Trooper, the sniper rifle, that is a load of crap. No sniper should have Tactical 1. No stormtroopers are ever going to beat the Master Chief or even try to be the Master Chief, so that's definitely something that needs to change. Alright guys, that's about all I have for you talking about this whole Star Wars Legion Special Operations and how or how not it may have related to ShatterPoint, the upcoming Star Wars miniatures game from Atomic Mass Games. So thank you guys all for watching. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and apparently if you mention ShatterPoint in your YouTube videos, they get a lot of views, and because of that one fact, I may just end up having to buy the game one way or the other. Stupid YouTube algorithm costing me $170 possibly. Oh well, anyway. So I'll see you guys next time.